Yeah, it's difficult. I mean, I'd be lying if I said otherwise. It's, I had 5.5 feet of water in my house. I was displaced for a year with a newborn, and it's just it's very traumatic. But I will say that, thanks to the federal government and thanks to insurance companies stepping up and doing what they were supposed to do, a lot of us have been able to move on.
Welcome to The Defense Never Rests with Morgan Akins, your monthly dose of uncommon sense about all things legal and some that are not.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to this episode of The Defense Never Rests. I'm your host, Megan. I'm joined again today by Lindsay. Hi, Lindsay.
Hey, Megan. How's it going?
Good. So the first podcast wasn't traumatizing enough, so you decided to come back for another.
Right. Yes, I did survive and I'm back.
Happy to have you and your beautiful color-coded shelves behind you. I just envy. Oh, I just love it. And so are those like novels or like?
Yeah, mostly. I am an avid reader. So I read every day, aside from what I obviously do for work, but I read every day. And these are the ones that over the years I've either retained. There's a couple on there that I haven't read, but these are mostly ones that I've read and decided that they were worth keeping the book afterwards. I have an entire separate shelf of books that I am to be reading and that I'm actively reading, which right now I'm on The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. Mm-hmm. So I just started it. So I can't tell you whether or not it's going to be good yet. I just finished The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo.
Oh, I did love that. Some people hated it. I don't know. I loved it.
I have a mixed bag on it. When I first finished it, I was like, oh yeah, this is really good. But then the more I thought about it, the more I'm like, I would say it was average. I would recommend reading it because I think it has good lessons in it and interesting storyline. But I think there was a couple things that I would have liked to have seen in addition to that. But
see, I don't read for lessons. I just read for stories, and like I want it to be easy and light and just like I want to escape for a little while. I don't even care if it's well written.
Yeah. I have dual purpose. I try and do, so I was literature, I studied literature in college, an English lit major. And so I try and read for both the fun content, light reading, and that's stuff that I usually get through Kindle Unlimited, like on my Kindle. And then I have the actual novels that I buy and read. And that's usually the stuff that I try and like find more, in depth that's going to actually make me think or, not just be the lighthearted story with the happy ever after. But I definitely read those too. But usually I have one of each going at the same time. So
yeah, I have like a very like low level of taste in books, but that's okay. I'm okay with it.
Hey, as long as it brings you joy and makes you happy, like I'm like, read whatever you want,
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, well, I'll go on a tangent, so I'll just stop myself there.
Yeah.
So today we have on Frank McLaughlin, and he is the reinsurance claim manager at TOA Reinsurance Company of America. And I talked to Frank a few weeks ago. We had an awesome conversation, and one of the things I was talking about is like reinsurance is such a foreign concept to a lot of us. Like it's hard to understand. So I wanted to get him on to talk about that, but also he was very passionate about, retaining good talent and bringing talent in. So he's here to talk a little bit about that, and who knows what else will come up. So with that, let's bring him in. Good morning, Frank. Welcome to The Defense Never Rests. How are you today?
Good morning, Megan. I'm doing well today, and yourself?
Great. And I'm so happy to have you, one, because I believe you are also in New Jersey, and very rarely do I have anyone on this podcast that's also like it is kind of close in proximity to where I am.
Okay.
But you're up north, I think, right?
Yes, I'm up in on the Jersey Shore.
Okay. Well, and I mean, I try to not talk about the weather, but I can't help it since we've had rain for like 5 days straight, and now at least the sun is shining and it's a beautiful, wonderful day outside. So
it's lovely here as well. Probably not quite as warm. I take it you guys weren't too badly impacted.
No, I mean,
a lot of rain.
I put down grass seed. I figured it was a good time.
That was smart
to get that fall grass growing. But anyway, we are not here to talk about the weather and grass. But if everyone who listens to this podcast knows that whenever I get new guests on, I like to get an idea of, how they got to where they are, because all our paths are so different. And you are an attorney by trade. You went to law school, but how did you end up going to law school? Like, was it something that you had planned to do? Did you have parents who were lawyers, or were you like some of us that we just went to law school because we didn't know how else we'd find a job?
Yeah. So, I was waiting tables after college, and a gentleman came in, and I would wait on tables for him every day. And one day he said, Frank, you're too obsequious not to be intelligent. And do you want to work at my company? And his company turned out to be American Reinsurance. And so I went and interviewed for the job and got the job. And I was there about 3 years. And I realized that in order for me to really have the experience necessary for the position, I either had to, spend 20 years in the industry, and then I'd be ready to go back into reinsurance, or I'd be better off going to law school and putting some tools in my toolbox. And I had some good mentors there that helped me make that decision, and I ended up going to law school and really, enjoyed that. So I was a little older. I got out of law school at 28, practiced for a few years, and then went back into insurance, where I'd start from whence I'd sprung.
I had a similar thing. I went to law school a little after working for a little bit, and I think it's definitely a different experience, because you approach it with a little more seriousness than I felt some of my classmates had. Although they're all still great attorneys and they also did great in law school, I just approached it in from a more serious position. Did you feel the same way?
A little bit. I'd stayed busy with academics, while I was working. I was getting my CPCU and ARM and that kind of stuff. So I was, and then through my friends, I'd briefed the whole first year of contracts. So that I really didn't have to worry about. I had the whole book that we were using, and I'd had all the, briefed the whole thing with, as we used to do in first year law school.
Mm-hmm.
So I was able to, concentrate on the courses I had less familiarity with. So it was kind of, I went in with a purpose. I wasn't the strong student in law school that I was in undergrad, but, it was a more talented pool of, competition, I guess, as well.
Yeah,
it is very
opposite.
opposite.
It kind of throws you for a loop a little bit. Like, I think everyone goes in being like, well, I did great in undergrad, so I'm going to do great here. And then you take your first exam, you're like, I didn't do great.
Yeah.
Like, it didn't work the same way.
Great took a lot of effort. A 3.0 didn't take too much effort. So
Yeah.
I settled for the 3.0. And
I was just gonna say, I did the opposite of you guys. I went straight through. I did my undergrad and I went straight into law school. So I didn't have that break where I got to work in between. But it was really interesting listening to a lot of my classmates when I was there, who were, most of them were older than me. I was probably one of the youngest people in my class, also because my birthday was young. I started law school on my 22nd birthday. So
wow.
Oh, wow.
I was like a baby, a true baby in law school. But I mean, it's so interesting interesting then and interesting now to hear your experiences, having had the opportunity to work in between and gain that experience prior to going.
Yeah, I felt a lot of people my experience, a lot of people went straight through. Like, it was more of like a continuation of the college fun, at least at the beginning, and then maybe reality kicked in at some point. But
yeah, it did.
Definitely... Well, it's got to kick in at some point, I guess. So then, Frank, when you graduated, did you go right back? You were working, so did you go right back to working in-house at the insurance company, or did you were in private practice for a little while?
I was in private practice at a firm called Kroll & Tract, which is a 50 attorney firm in Midtown Manhattan, and it's gone through a couple of iterations since. But we did mostly work for London market clients, handling a lot of construction, New York construction, as well as we were a consultant on indemnification and additional insurance issues for the London market across the country.
And how was your experience being like a new attorney, like being a New York attorney, like working in downtown Manhattan? Like, I have this idea in my head of like what it's like, and it's probably exactly the same as like what it was for any of us in Philly, but
it seems a lot more thrilling and exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, my first office was probably the nicest office I ever had in my life. It was on the fifth story, overlooking Madison Avenue, or actually overlooking Fifth Avenue,
Mhm.
and it was just this amazing view of the people coming and going. And we all used to wear suits all the time there. I'd have my bow ties on. I was just zipping in and out of but it was you had all this autonomy. I was given I had my own secretary back in the day, even though I knew how to type. But I would stay routinely all through the night, or work till to get a motion out. I was sort of because I'd been on law review, I was sort of designated as the guy who did a lot of the appellate, first rights, the right throughs of the first time around, and then the summary judgment motions, which are very big in New York, as they are elsewhere. But it's quite the process, and you work on those and spend 30-40 hours on them, and then in order to get it out in the morning, to get it bound and off to the courts, depending on what kind of motion it was, it had to be done. So I would just stay there and smoke a cigar in the office and have my port and relax in my boxer shorts, working away. I would be the last guy in the office at 2 a.m.
It's a very Mad Men picture you just painted for me.
Yeah.
It was kind of fun. I mean, I didn't live too far away, but it was just a different. It seemed like it was a different time back then. It's almost hard to remember it going back to the early 90s. Yeah.
I mean, I this was even before law school, but I remember the job that I worked in between college and law school. When the big boss came into town, she lived in Chicago and she would come to DC, and she would always smoke in the office. And thinking about that now, I'm like, that is the most bizarre thing. Like, I can't even imagine what would happen, like, if someone did that now, but it was like, oh yeah, she's here, just expect it to be smoky.
Yeah. Later, when I went over, I did some audits over in Europe, especially in Paris, and there's an ashtray in front of everybody. It's just it's an odd thing. When I was at Mendes Mount as a summer associate, they were still smoking there because one of their big clients was whoever makes Marlboro or whatever.
Yeah.
And so their client basically compelled them to allow smoking in the office, and that went away shortly thereafter. But it was always funny. I mean, right from my first days in the business, there were people in the office. You would be able to smoke in your office, but not at your cubicle or whatever. But as long as you had a door, it was okay. And then you had to get a smoke eater, and then eventually they told you to leave, go outside, take your cancer with you.
Yeah, kind of like when they let you smoke on planes.
Yeah. Always the scariest thing for me was how many years later those you could still see where they glued those ashtrays together, and they. I'm like, how old is this plane? There hasn't been smoking in 30 years.
But then, like, the funny part is that, like, you could smoke on a plane, but they would have the smoking section and just have a curtain, as if that was going to stop anything from flowing through the cabin.
Right.
And I think it's extra alarming to think about it now after the last 2.5 years of when we were going on, I think, planes, everyone's worried about COVID, and now you're like, oh, but people used to just smoke on them, no problem.
Yeah. Crazy.
It's crazy how things change. Now, you had mentioned you did audits overseas. Was that for your law firm or for one of the companies that you worked for after?
Well, I've worked for a number of companies. I think my first trips overseas were when I was with Riverstone, which is a claim handling entity handling mostly asbestos pollution, health hazards, and construction defect up in New Hampshire. And so I was up there, and we had clients, the Fairfax companies that had French subsidiaries, and they were handling books of asbestos and pollution and health hazard claims there. And so they had English claim files, and they needed me to do that for them. So we'd go over and review those and spend a few weeks looking at files and assessing the financial impact of those claims to the organization. And we'd write a report in that whole the whole Megillah. Later, when I served as the chief claim officer to Sukratsi Generali SPA, their U.S. branch office, we would routinely go over to help out our clients in Italy, France, London, and we just jump in and I remember one time we went over to do an audit of white finger claims. The white finger is what you get if you're on using a automated drill too long. If you're doing, it's generally associated with minors. And so it was black lung. There was some black lung disease. There was white finger, which is a repetitive stress disorder, and there was also tendinitis claims from whatever reason. So that was interesting. We were auditing at the plaintiff shop there, and we were trying to put values on these claims. And I had no idea what I was doing, but just sort of, they put me in charge, and so I just went and led the team and tried to figure it out as we went.
So how was the change of working environment? Because at the time you were still in New York, right? So how was the change of working environment from the US to, when you're over there immersed in, with those claims there?
Well, these are all, very developed countries, and, in London certainly has an even older, insurance tradition than we do here in the US. They tend to have long work days, take more breaks. They sort of enjoy life a little more. The lunches are a little better. And
you're not going to Salad Express or whatever.
Yeah. You're sitting down for a proper meal, better expense accounts. They just sort of expect you to enjoy yourself and have a glass of wine when you're at lunch or two, and then you go back and you work late. So it's a trade-off, but it was a tremendously professional environment, and I learned a lot from my European colleagues over time. But I also did consulting for them for the London market on construction defect claims in the U.S. And they were writing a lot of that. London continues to be heavily active in that market.
So I feel like I got ahead of myself, but you started mentioning Paris, and I was like, oh man, we got some interesting stuff going on. But so let's back up though to your time, at the law firm in New York. You said you're working on like construction labor claims, and the labor law market in New York is still just this giant complex thing that it's its own little monster, or large monster, I should say. But how did you end up transitioning out of the private practice back to working for an insurance company?
Yeah, I was getting to a point in my career where I could see what I was good at and what I was doing. What I wasn't great at was, oral arguments and that kind of thing. The think on your feet type of stuff. What I tended to gravitate towards was writing. I was a very strong writer. But I could see what happened to great writers is they get kind of locked up in a room, and you get a new assignment. You'd be, told, this needs to be done on Friday, and your whole day would be a couple of days would get wrecked as you got it done. And then, on Friday you get thanks, and you get a new assignment in addition to whatever your own files are. But I just didn't really like that lifestyle too much. It was a lot of the work and not as much of the glory. And I also knew that I didn't have so if I didn't have a traditional niche as a litigator, could I bring clients in? I knew that I was not a salesman at heart, and I really didn't want to be. I could see the guys who were doing well early in their careers trying to bring in clients and leveraging family relations, and all perfectly appropriate. I just didn't want to do that. So I was kind of running out of ways for me to, have a long and productive career in insurance, in law. I just couldn't see my way through it in New York. And then I got an opportunity. I got more money and a better or a good option to go to an insurance company and sort of leverage my years of reinsurance experience and claims experience into a traditional claims job, as well as my experience litigating a fairly wide variety of bodily injury and property damage claims in New York.
I was just going to say, and I don't know if you had already told Megan this in the past or whatnot. Now, when you went back into the insurance industry, was it directly back to the same place that you had started before you went to law school?
No, it's a good question. I went to a place called the Home Insurance Company, or it was actually known as Risk Enterprise Management at that point, and then it transmogrified into the Home Insurance Company in liquidation at some point. So it was a good role. I had a good role. I got a tremendous amount of experience because they didn't have enough people. This was sort of a dying ship. So they put me in charge of all their TPA administered business. I got pretty much a free reign to run my cases I saw fit. They just didn't have enough, layers to establish, a lot of the bureaucracy that other insurance companies have. So we just kind of flew by the seat of our pants. I was handling 500 claims. I was having a great time. And, but I was on a ship that didn't look like it had long to sail. And I was right. I mean, just the company was in distress. And so ultimately I moved to a couple of different jobs and started managing people rather than actual claims. And I found that I had a flair and an ability for managing the process of a claim department, running the individuals, getting to know them, getting to know how to get the best work out of them, keeping them engaged, and giving them the technical support they need to succeed in their roles.
So what do you feel in that role? Like, what are you looking for from your team in order to get the best product and work out of those individuals? Like, are there certain personality traits or anything about individuals that you're looking for?
Yeah, it's funny I came into this industry by accident, as many people do. But at the time I came in, there were highly developed training modules at a lot of insurance companies, at Liberty in particular. I know some of the big auto companies have detailed training programs, the Geico's of the world. But that really started to go away. A lot of companies became smaller, and the in-house training went away. And then the profession just started getting a lot older, and we just stopped having. People didn't really want to work in insurance. It sounds sort of 1950s, even though it's a huge part of our workforce, in our economy. But nobody wanted to work there, and I was there by accident. I got my training at Crawford and Company. They arranged to have me go down there and spend a month or two down there and got me some basic training. And then law school was obviously helpful, but I learned on the job as I went forward from there. Now there's a company called the Jacobson Group, and they're specialized in retaining and it's just big staffing organization. Yeah. So, they do a study on insurance pretty much quarterly, and their most recent one indicated that 68% of companies in the P&C market plan to add staff within the next 12 months. Only 5% plan on shrinking. And the major areas they're going to add are technology, underwriting, and claims. Those are the core functions of most insurance companies. But if where are you going to get these people from? If you're hiring new people, if you're just poaching off the market, it's going to be very expensive, right? Yeah. Because you're always going to have to pay more than somebody's worth in order to get them away from their their place of current employment. So as I went through my career as a manager, I was always faced with this problem: is that we just didn't have people coming in at an affordable pay scale to do a entry-level claim job. We just weren't getting them, and we certainly weren't getting them from colleges, and we just weren't seeing the kind of talent we wanted. So there's a couple of things. Sometimes you need to identify people from your paraprofessional staff that have potential. These people might be functioning as in either an administrative capacity, a billing clerk, say, or somebody got in. You just find somebody who seems to have a little bit more on the ball than the next person in a similar role, and see if you can engage them and put them on but you have to give them training. So that really comes from the manager. So you can enroll them in CLM, CPCU, Associate in Claims, SCLA, which is the Senior Claim Law Associate Program. You can do internal programs, but the key thing is that you need to give them time during their day in order to study. So I would generally allocate 2 hours a day. I just want you studying. Whether it's your associate in claims, you're just starting out, or whether you're, getting a more advanced claim degree such as the SCLA or CPCU maybe. I want you to see at your desk 2 hours a day, for the first couple of years of your career, just learning. And then we'll give you, and then what I would do is once or twice a week, I would go in and spend an hour with them. I'd go over the answers to the questions. I'd bounce questions. They could talk to me about claim issues. I'd see who's, we'd set up role plays for negotiations and how we would handle certain situations. How would you handle a telephone inquiry about coverage? And so we would just, we had to, because we didn't have people on staff and we couldn't hire somebody who'd already been trained by a company that had a proper training program. We had to sort of develop our own by the seat of our pants. And I've done that at about 4 or 5 institutions where I've managed to train up people who lack college degrees for the most part, certainly lack insurance experience. And it's a matter of trying to identify people who are going to fit into a claims setting. You have a lot of police officers leaving the profession, corrections officers leaving the profession, people departing the military. These people are all bringing some of the skill sets that we really look for. They're detail oriented, they're organized, they're essentially combative. They don't back down easily. They're sort of alpha personalities, many of them. Strong negotiation skills are what you're looking for. I look for people with a background in construction because they know how things work. And so they can look. They can look at an accident and see the dynamics of the accident better than even an attorney might, in terms of just saying, well, it's clear they didn't have that. They weren't tied off at this place. They should have been tied off here. If they'd been doing this properly, maybe the accident wouldn't happen. Or if the company had provided some, a different safety rig, the accident might not have happened. I just think they bring people who have actually been out in the world doing things and solving practical problems are a valuable resource if you're looking to expand your inventory of claims people, because you're just not getting enough of them coming. There's relatively limited number of insurance related programs, and most of those are geared towards the more moneyed parts of the business, the underwriting, the profit centers. They're not necessarily oriented towards the back end of the house, which is the claim function.
I think that other experience that, we develop in our lives is so important. Kind of even what we had talked about earlier, how you guys had that experience before law school, putting law school in perspective for you. And then now people coming into this claims industry and the insurance industry and being able to draw on their personal experiences in order to really get into their role that you're looking at them for,
Yeah, I mean, and it's where you suffer is with the Generation Z, right? According to a Talos survey that came out last year, only 37% of Gen Z students would consider a career in insurance, but 76% are interested in careers in technology. So how do we sort of make this a job that has some technological appeal?
Well, that was going to be my question to you when you said that. I was like, so what's your pitch to Gen Z then to bring them in,
Well, I think we can embrace the technology. I mean, I think on the claims side, certainly on the property side, that's a very tech-driven world. First-party claims, you're out there with your drones, you're doing mapping, using computerized devices. You've got pricing. You're using pricing systems. You're basically carrying a laptop around with you. So there is some technological appeal there. We also have a growing role for the claim person in risk avoidance. So these there are risk management positions. Those are highly technical. And people are going to be using a lot of different software, like the use of cameras in commercial vehicles, facing outwards, facing inwards, various ways of establishing metrics of proper performance in terms of brake time, and really being able to document how accidents happen. Now, people need to know how to use that technology. People know how to need how to engage it. So I think that you can get people into the industry, but it's not one of the high-paying jobs as relative to a career in technology. So I think that's always going to be the problem. But we've always had a problem, I think, getting people excited about insurance. It's not an exciting field. A lot of people like it when they get in there and have, perfectly adequate and satisfying careers. It's just hard to get excited about it. I mean, it's a little more excited to get interested about law, but one of the big areas you see is people departing the practice of law to join a claims organization. That's a very easy step, because you have all the tools at that point. The problem is you just tend to be higher priced than the average claim handler. And it skews the people with advanced degrees want to work on the most complex stuff, right? So they're engaged in if you have to have them doing a small auto rear end hit, that person's not going to be as engaged in that. So it's always getting work to the right level. And you can have people that you train on auto first party. I do see a lot of attorneys coming in. I think that that's a good thing in many respects, but it does also appear to shut down people's growth potential if they come in not as an attorney. And that's, you sort of have to have different types of experience and create career paths for people so they can look and see that they can realistically have a career like Bill's or Jane's, and it goes to a certain level. And it's a realistic and rational expectation for them if they work, if they develop the tools they need in terms of whether it's a managerial skill or a complex claim handling skill or a special or a speciality, and whether it's in CAT claims or in trucking claims. I mean, those are areas that are driving the insurance industry right now. And if you're willing to get in on those, I think you could have a satisfying career.
It's almost like a way is to even approach it at like the high school level. Because there's some people who might not want to go to college, but don't necessarily know what trade or what they might want to do. And the insurance industry might seem so foreign. And as you said, like, it's not flashy on the outside that people think, and almost if you were to come in at the high school level and like show people that this could be a career that you might not necessarily need, a college degree to accomplish.
Yeah, I mean, high schoolers are probably also, I mean, like you said, I mean, it's not super flashy or whatnot, but like how many high schoolers are even thinking about any kind of insurance, like at least people as you get older, you think, oh yeah, I have to pay my car insurance and my life insurance and my homeowner's insurance and my renters, whatever it may be. Like you're more exposed to it. Whereas you're in high school, you're under kind of like the parental umbrella, and like maybe,
That's
your
fair.
parent or guardian are like having you like kind of like chip in to like pay for whatever your car insurance maybe or whatnot, but you just aren't having the exposure to it to even think about having a career like that.
I think if you're a company that has a big enough footprint in a particular community, you can do that effectively. Can I do it ad hoc? I'll probably do it a parent teacher or at a parent, bring your dad to work day.
Yeah.
Or bring your dad to school day and talk about his job. And, I can watch all those kids slowly go to sleep as I talk. So, I get it. But it's, I think it's difficult to engage young people in this profession without either making it a more exciting, more dynamic vision of a job, or by making it a better paying job. They go where the money is. We're going to see a huge amount of loss of talent over the next 3 to 10 years as this generation of claim professionals ages out, and we just don't have enough young people coming into the pipeline right now. And while these are all good ideas, I don't think we'll solve it today. I
No.
told you some of the ways
No.
that I think that it's, we've been able to, in my career, we've been able to get some people into claims who wouldn't ordinarily be in there, get them trained up and get them into productive roles, and where they've seen tremendous success. Because if you look at, I got some information on how much, what the average claim salary is. So salaries for beginning adjusters now, it's about between 38 and 40K, $40,000. With moderate experience, they can expect to make 60,000 in 3 to 5 years. That seems like it's a pretty good job for somebody right out of, out of a 2-year degree or out of college. And then with complex claims and social inflation are driving the litigation cycle, there are a lot more claim handlers out there making 6 figures and more, much more. And then they go into, then you end up in management, and that's where the the real success is, I guess.
Yeah. And this isn't the first time that I've heard someone talk about like hiring or pulling up within and having a lot of success at their organization with it. Like I had a woman on that she was talking about that, like my like right hand gal used to be like a line cook, and I just, she just was a super hard worker, and I, said, hey, let's bring her over to risk management. And she's like, she started off low, and then but she worked really hard, and she was really passionate about the company, and she's like, she's one of like my best teammates. So I think like the whole idea of kind of looking within and promoting people within that are loyal to the company, and like teaching them what they need to know to transition into a new role is a great way to like build like talent. It's just also just getting people in the door that is the other challenge.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny, they talk about what this generation wants as benefits, and I'm always driven by medical and vacation. That's always, whatever. I want more vacation if I can possibly have it, and I want a better medical plan, and better 401ks and bonuses and just the money stuff.
Yeah.
But this generation wants more flexible hours, more vacation time. They want work from home options. Some people want unlimited vacation, and one way to get people in, I think, is to give student loan assistance. I think that's an excellent way. You start paying somebody's debt off over 5 years, or then you've got an employee for that amount of time. The gym membership or the fitness facility, I think that's huge. This is a much more fit generation than ever before. In a lot of places,
many smokers.
Not as many smokers, at least not cigarettes. But if you have enough space, you should consider a decent gym in your facility. And if you don't, you can either help with gym memberships. I think young people are into that. And then the other one is pet insurance.
Oh yeah.
Apparently that's something that's huge. People want pet insurance.
Yes, they want it, and they don't want to spend a lot of money on it. But but how about now that the climate has changed, though, that I feel like people want more flexible schedules too. Like the idea of having to go into an office every day now, I think it puts, especially the younger generation, is like, that's a big turnoff. I think.
Yeah. And I there's relatively few companies that are not being somewhat flexible on work from home arrangements. You have to be competitive. And if everybody's sort of going to 2 days a week or 3 days a week in the office and the rest at home, I think you have to, be prepared to accommodate that. You can't be, if you're old fashioned, you're just going to be left behind. And then I had people working for me that were entirely hybrid in my last role. I had, a person in Chicago, a person in Atlanta, a person in Texas, people in Pasadena. And then we decided to sell our offices. They were kind of winding down that shop, but they sold the offices and just everybody worked from home.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I will say the insurance industry, I think, has always been a little bit ahead of the curve with the remote working. I mean, I just remember, like, typically anyone I would talk to, an adjuster was not in an office. They were in their home office. So I feel like they were definitely ahead of the game with that, but it's definitely something I think the younger generation is very hot on.
Yeah, well, I think you see that a lot at TPAs. So right now, TPAs control their costs in part, in my opinion, by allowing flexible work from home arrangements where you'd never go into the office and you never have to travel. And it suits people who have certain dynamics going on in their own life, whether it's care for an elder parent, care for a young child, just or general supervision of an older child, availability to be there for school pickups and drop-offs. These are just hugely beneficial. And there's so many ways to monitor workflow performance that it shouldn't really be a problem for the organization to track productivity if it needs to.
But look, people are plenty unproductive in an office.
Yeah.
Like, you could be sitting there. It doesn't mean you're working. So.
Yeah. Yeah, those signs on the doors that you see that are like, please don't talk to me, I'm easily distracted, like when you're sitting in your office and everybody's there to like have a conversation with. But do you think that there is a role for technology in filling some of the gaps in getting like human people in to do it, or like, improving technology in a certain way that might fill some of the gaps or make the actual people's jobs easier before you can build the workforce up?
Yeah, I think that a lot of claims that, especially on the lower end of the claim value, you can run those through the injuries through algorithms that would come up with a range of claim values for a particular injury. So if you had a fractured humerus on your non-dominant arm, what's that worth? And then if there's other things, how much lost time is there, and what were the total amount of medicals incurred? And you could, in theory, have basically machines that try to value it. And there's a lot of products out there that try to do that. They get marketed to me all the time. I don't find most of them very effective, but I think the future's definitely there. And that's going to eliminate a lot of, I think, the lower positions in claims. But unless there's dramatic changes to how we do litigated claims in terms of the plaintiff's bar, the plaintiff's bar is not going to settle for something that was crunched out of a machine. It's going to it's going to make its arguments as to the massive value of a case, and you're going to have people with the experience, talk about with the mediator about the liability issues, about the potential defenses, about whether these the medicals are all on liens and therefore should be discounted as opposed to liens, medicals that have actually been paid out of pocket. So I think it's, as long as you have difficult issues that require complex thinking, the senior claim professionals will certainly be around. It's just whether we have enough of them and they're adequately seasoned by the time the generation walks out the door.
I guess that's a double-edged sword then. If you're having more technology heavy experience on the lower end of claims values, then those people aren't getting that experience to become the senior claims people that you want them to be down the road.
Yes, that's very true, and there's really no way around that. But you can get people. I think the difficulty is for a claim manager to say, I want to have a trainee, and this is what I want to do. I want to hire 3 trainees. I figure one will stay long enough to be good. I want to hire 3. I want to put them through a little training program that I'm going to design, and using the various tools we talked about earlier, and then just basically run those people through a 6-month course where they're getting paid to just learn how the system operates, to get the basics of the job, get them right out of, and then you may have to pay them a little more than you pay somebody else. You got to be competitive with what other training programs are out there for a B student, from a middle of the road college.
Yeah.
Go
I
ahead.
was just gonna say, I know I've participated from the other side in those kinds of training programs for claims where, I've played the role of the plaintiff's attorney and said, tried to needle the claims representative. And there are people who don't, they're the new claims people that aren't used to kind of dealing with the banter maybe yet of that you get. So you put on your best plaintiff's hat and pretend for a little bit.
Sure.
But it was I think it was a good experience for them. It was always a good experience for me.
And the bar has always been really good about, helping support player development and, in the claims teams. So
Mhm.
they've been good about getting in there and providing learning tools. But I think you just have to think about it. If you're a claim manager, you have to start some succession planning, and you have to have these career tracks that people, not everybody wants to manage people. They want to be a senior technical person. And some people just are natural, natural leaders, and they should be managing people and processes and making for a better claim product overall.
And not everyone should be a manager,
No.
Yeah.
There's just some people that's just not their role. And like we talk about it a lot at, here too, like, there's some people who, are good at, putting their head down and, working the files, billing their hours. There's people who are, excel at, client development. There's people who work in between. Like everyone has their strengths, and you have to figure out what those strengths are and play on them.
I agree.
One thing I wanted to talk about before we run out of time, though, is, and you and I had talked about it on the phone, is reinsurance. Because because while I get it, I don't get it. And I just say this I had a friend that I worked with at an old law firm, and he left to go work for a reinsurance company. And I was like, what, how did you even find that job? Like, do you even know what reinsurance is? He's like, I honestly Googled what is reinsurance before my first interview. He's like, 'cause I had no idea. He got the job. He had a great time there. But, for those of us, sitting here and those listening, can you give us like the 101 of what reinsurance is? We have an idea of like what your, what your day looks like, because your claim situation now is different from what it was, when you started in claims.
Yes. Well, reinsurance is a risk-sharing mechanism by which insurers give reinsurers a portion of their premium in exchange for the reinsurers taking a portion of the loss. And typically reinsurers, so if you were a primary insurance company and you wrote mostly $1 million policies, just keeping it simple. So for those, if you wrote mostly $1 million GL policies and auto policies, you might want to have protection above, say, $500,000. So you would buy, treaty reinsurance that would apply to all claims above $500,000. Now, obviously, there's fewer claims above 500 than there are below, so there's less. You're keeping more of your premium, since you're retaining the most dangerous part of the risk, which is the higher frequency, lower severity claims. But on the larger claims, those are, that's being borne by the reinsurers, and they just. And that's what we know is treaty reinsurance. And now there's per risk reinsurance, which is called facultative reinsurance, and that's where you write a particular tower of insurance or $100 million policy for, Amazon, and then you would facultatively spread your risk by taking, a certain person would take 5% or 10% or 15% of 5 million x 2 million, or 20 million x 25 million, and you'd that would get broken up various ways that way. But essentially, it's about sharing the risk, and then in exchange for that, you share the premium. And what the reinsurer claim person does is they want to make sure that these losses fall within the treaty conditions. And those treaties are typically drafted. The reinsurance contracts are drafted by attorneys, which might have been what your friend was doing over in that role. And they're incredibly detailed documents, often 100 pages long. And that's because it applies to so many potentially multiple lines of business, multiple insureds over long time periods. And it basically gives protection for that insurer to go out and write the business with the understanding that provided that it, shares its premium and doesn't write outside the lines, there are exclusions in treaties. So you might have a underground mining exclusion. If you have an underground mining exclusion and you're all of a sudden you see that they're writing mining risk, that's something that may potentially not be covered under your contract. And also maybe something you want to draw to the underwriter's attention as an undesirable risk, given the particular language within the treaty. And then they can, then they'll go to the broker. Typically, reinsurance contracts are brokered. So there's large reinsurance brokerage houses, Gallagher and Guy Carpenter are big ones.
So the treaty comes first, and then deciding the underwriting process comes next between all the different companies.
Well, typically one insurance company would have a bunch of reinsurers,
right?
And so if we'll take Allstate. So if Allstate wants to write a certain line of business, they want to make sure they're protected from the losses that fall outside their business modeling. Things
Sure.
that they can account for. They would rather keep for themselves because that's, they have the actuaries to do that. And the stuff that represents the greatest risk for a potential downside or geographical considerations, if they, think that they are too heavily insured in, say, Florida, South Florida, they might want to have some extra reinsurance on that simply because it's a high risk market. So for whatever reason, they're purchasing, they want to write whatever they want to write, and they want to be able to change and add. They may want to be able to add a pharmaceutical policy, and they might want to write hang gliding or something. There's certain little niches they might want to write through an MGA or an MGU. But the idea at the end of the day is they want to have the flexibility to write casualty business, however that's defined in their treaty, or property business, however it's defined in the treaty, as broadly as they wish. And they want to have the protection. It's a business of utmost good faith. Both sides are heavily reliant on the accuracy of the information that's being fed. So as a reinsurance claim person, I'm constantly outgoing to meet with senior claim folks at the underlying insurance companies. We're discussing their protocols, their planning, what's their how protected are they in the event of a catastrophe? Do they have a cat plan? Do they have and then we look at individual claims to see if they're being handled generally in a way that's consistent with best practices as we understand them, whether they're being, or if they're potentially exposing the reinsurer to ECO and XPL, excess of policy limits judgments, and potential bad faith ECO.
Yeah, so you answered my next question, because I was going to ask how your role has shifted as a claim manager in reinsurance compared to when you were in liability claims. I mean, it's definitely not, or it doesn't seem like a claim by claim basis. Like it seems like a more of a management of or overseeing larger claims.
Yes, there's both. If you're working on the property side, you're seeing, you might just be starting to see the Hurricane Ian claims starting to come in. And so you want to make sure that you have that coded. So all the claims come in under that CAT code, so that in the event that we have reinsurance of our own, what we would call a retrocession, that we can, for catastrophes, that we can have everything coded properly and get it out the door. You also, so you're looking at sort of the bigger picture a lot more often. You're looking at 1,000 claims or 10,000 claims as opposed to the individuals. You might want to check a few of them to make sure that, the I's are getting dotted and the T's crossed, but you're not going to have an opportunity to look at all 10,000 claims that might come in on an individual catastrophe. Yeah. However, on a large single loss, in one of my prior roles in reinsurance, I had the Costa de Concordia, the Concordia boat that went over, with lost many individuals and lots of property, and was $1 billion claim. So you're looking at a lot of these larger individual claims and trying to assess from all of our insureds, what's what's this loss going to represent to us? So if you had the MGM shootings, for example, you might have 20 different insurers who have that you reinsure that have policies that are exposed as a result of some role they had. They might have been an insurer of the police department, they might have been an insurer of the MGM, insurer of the security teams, ensure the people who put on the show, the people who provided crowd control. I mean, there's just all of these people that are going to be a part of $1 billion claim like that. And you have to, as a reinsurer, assess what's the risk to my organization as a result of this, one catastrophic loss event.
Yeah.
Mm.
And I'm actually glad you brought up Hurricane Ian, because I've been hearing so much about the impact that is going to have on the insurance industry. And what are your thoughts on it? Because to me, I just looking at the loss from afar, I'm like, it is. I just can't even believe what I'm seeing. I mean, and you lived through Sandy, which was, terror, it's similar too. It's just similarly catastrophic.
Yeah, well, my heart goes out to everyone who's suffered as a result of that. From a reinsurance standpoint, it's going to be bad in the sense that, to the extent that you're heavily invested in risk in that part of the world, you're going to end up having to pay up, and that could be potentially crippling to an insurance company or its reinsurers. But on the flip side, rates are expected to go up by 50% on the reinsurance side this year. So I've heard. Now I've also heard that there's only about 5% of the homeowners that are insured in Florida. That can't possibly be true. I'm sure it's a much higher number.
Very low.
But if that's the case, it may not be as much of an insurance event as it is a taxpayer event, because they're going to have, as they did with Sandy, they're just going to have to, they can't just let the whole state go under. You're going to get some big spending Republicans for a while now.
And from your perspective, because you live at the shore and you were in an area, I believe, that Sandy directly affected. So you must it must hit you even closer, because it's something that, you lived through and had to go through.
Yeah, it's difficult. I'd be lying if I said otherwise. I had 5.5 feet of water in my house. I was displaced for a year with a newborn, and it's just it's very traumatic. But I will say, thanks to the federal government and thanks to insurance companies stepping up and doing what they were supposed to do, a lot of us have been able to move on, including myself. So
yeah,
it's difficult the first few months just trying to get it. Oh, I tell you, it was interesting when Sandy happened, I was at the shore and I had my cell phone all charged up and everything. I don't think I'd gone to a laptop at that point yet, but within a day, my phone was dead, and I was unable to do that one thing that I was supposed to be doing, which is be there for my insureds when they have a catastrophe, and I couldn't even oversee it from afar. So I was out of work for 2 weeks, and my clients, who were major multinational companies that had huge flooding damage, I just had to rely on my team and our CAT planning to make sure it worked out okay. And we did. We were able to, fulfill our obligations and get out to see our clients. And we had a CAT team in place, a CAT program. But it wasn't easy. And it was a very frustrating thing for me to be, I'm a boots on the ground kind of guy. So
yeah. Do you have any tips for either the people who are experiencing this kind of catastrophe from Hurricane Ian, having gone through something yourself, as to how to get themselves through that process?
Yeah, well, I was very fortunate. I had assistance from, big property people that were, through my work, and they were able to help me out and get a team on, fly a team in to help me and all this other stuff. But one thing I would say is that definitely people should think about using a public adjuster. The advantage of a public adjuster is he represents you, not the insurance company, and he gets a portion of whatever he gets you above what the insurance company offers. So he's heavily motivated to try and get you more money for your loss. For people who are completely dispossessed of their house and property, that can be a very valuable person to have, to the extent that you don't have capped limits. So if you have a $250,000 cap and you have a $500,000 house that's sitting in the ocean, you probably should just take the 250 and move on, depending on your personal property claim. But if you're adequately insured, it's important to get the full benefit of the policy.
Yeah.
And then from the other side of it, what do you recommend for the people who are going to be handling these claims and, the influx and, for the insurance side of it? Yeah.
Well, just don't get burned out, because it's, you have to take a lot of breaks, because you're just hearing people at their wits' end or just so disconsolate. It can get you down. Yeah. And, fortunately in my life, I've mostly been on the commercial side, so people don't get quite as agitated about their business as they do, as they do about their home and their cars and where they're going to live and where you're going to put them. And so I think it's important to have the people that you have on the front line, to have processes that work, to make sure that you're able to refer somebody to a supervisor, and the supervisor can refer to a manager. Basically keep the lines of communication open. Yeah. As a manager, I want to check in with my people and make sure they're not getting burned out. Check in with them every couple of times a week and just see how they're doing. Because it's just really a matter of keeping up the esprit de corps within the organization. And you have to remember, this is how you build your brand. Your brand is, as XYZ Insurance Company, is really put to the test when it comes to claims. And they want to make sure that you have somebody out there. So that means you have had to made your arrangements with property cap people well in advance, so they can swing into action and get out there to the affected properties and cut checks where necessary, or that you can make sure that you have the ability to get a check out there quickly.
Yeah. I think that's great advice. So we are just about out of time, but I didn't want to let you go without first asking you this. And I ask everyone a variation of this question, but knowing what you know now throughout your career, what advice would you give your younger self?
Save more. No, the advice I give myself is to be patient, and trust that when you're doing high quality work, that you're going to be recognized for it. They're going to find a role for you within the organization. I probably left a few too many times when I just got dissatisfied. So if I had to do anything back, I'd probably, don't be so quick to take offense and leave. Just sort of work it out, and be patient as a manager. These are people that you have working for you, and you can cause them great deal of happiness, or you can cause them a great deal of pain and suffering, and you don't want to do that. And I've not always taken that advice to heart. So I as I get older and more sensible and get some wisdom of my years, I think just to be a kinder, gentler, not to be as brutally frank as I tend to be.
That's a good nickname, like brutally frank.
Well, that was I was able to use that nickname when I was a boxer in my 20s, and then also when I was a food critic later in my life. So restaurant critic.
Wow.
Do you still do food critic on the side? Or
well, I did it for about 3 years when I was up in New Hampshire, and just enjoyed it a lot. And I wrote under the nom de plume, brutally frank. So.
Love that.
It was fun.
I think you should resurface it. You can do it anywhere now. Just start a blog, or.
Oh, and I got to meet. I was in a small city, and I got to meet all the chefs, and I always had a table when I came, and there was some nice elements to it.
That sounds like a dream.
Any inside recommendations of somewhere to eat in New Hampshire?
Well, you're in Philadelphia, are you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I love what is his name? Well, this is the wrong time to blank out.
Pressure's
there's a-
on. It's only being recorded. It's okay.
The Red Rooster. No, there's it's a great place, and I just can't think of it. I just can't think of it. So I won't bore your audience with.
Well, when you think of it later, you can tell us, and then maybe we can like pass it along somehow.
Okay, I'll do that.
I mean, if not, we're definitely take the advice. So
okay, well, I will be sure to send it over to you. It's on the tip of my tongue.
But one of the things I find is that one of the more interesting things about this podcast is finding about people is like side passions. So in one sentence, you told us that you were a boxer and a food critic.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Do you still box?
I don't. I have a heavy bag hanging from my house, and so I can go down there and hit that anytime. But I boxed up until I was in my 30s, as for fun, and then I just decided. I think at some point I just, taking enough blows to the head.
Yeah.
So the heavy bag's gonna have to do it for now.
Exactly.
Well, Frank, you've been a pleasure. I appreciate you taking the time to sit and talk with Lindsay and I today. I truly appreciate it.
Well, thank you very much, ladies. I very much appreciate it. I hope you have a wonderful weekend. And just in case I didn't say it at the beginning, nothing I say should be construed as having been said on behalf of or of my employer, Total Reinsurance.
If you like what you hear, please like and subscribe to The Defense Never Rests at Apple Podcasts. And you can also find us at YouTube at TDNR Podcast.